Hi everyone, and welcome back to Victim Advocacy Central. If you're new here, this channel is all about providing clear and accessible information for victims of crime and their families. Today, we're going to take a detailed look at the criminal justice process here in Texas. Whether you've been a victim, a witness, or just curious, it's important to understand how the system works. Let's break it down step by step. If you have been victimized, the first step in the process is reporting the crime to your local law enforcement agency. This could be done by calling 911, visiting a police station, or reporting the crime online, depending on the type of offense. Once the crime is reported, law enforcement officers will respond, investigate, and gather evidence. In some cases, they might collect witness statements, forensic evidence, and photographs from the scene. For victims, this can be one of the most overwhelming steps, but it's also critical. After the report, law enforcement begins a formal investigation. Officers or detectives may interview witnesses, gather more physical evidence, and review surveillance footage, if applicable. In some cases, the police may obtain a search warrant to look for additional evidence. If they believe they have enough evidence to identify a suspect, law enforcement will seek an arrest warrant. Once granted, the suspect is arrested and taken into custody. If a suspect is arrested on the spot without a warrant, they will still need to appear before a judge for what's called a probable cause hearing. Once the individual has been booked in jail, they will then have to go before a judge. This is called arraignment. At this hearing, the judge will formally read the charges against the defendant, set bail, and explain any conditions for release. If the defendant cannot post bail, they will remain in custody until trial. If the individual is allowed to post their bond, they will have to pay their bail amount. Bail is essentially a financial guarantee that the defendant will return for future court appearances. Now, there are a few different types of bonds, and each works a little differently. First, we have cash bonds. This is where the defendant or their family pays the full bail amount in cash. If the defendant attends all of their court dates, they'll get their money back minus any court fees. Next, we have surety bonds, which are the most common. This is where a bail bondsman steps in. The defendant only pays a percentage of the bail, usually around 10%, and the bondman guarantees the rest. The percentage paid is not refundable. Then there's the personal recognizance bond, a PR bond. This type of bond doesn't require any money upfront. Instead, the defendant signs a promise to return for their court dates. PR bonds are typically given to people with low-risk profiles like those without a criminal history. The case will be filed with the district attorney's office and will go through an intake process. If the case is accepted, the case moves into the pretrial phase. During this time, both the defense and prosecution will gather more evidence and prepare their cases. There may also be pretrial hearings where the judge rules on motions like whether certain evidence can be used in court. This phase can last several months, especially if the case is complicated. It's also a period when plea bargains might be offered. A plea bargain is when the defendant agrees to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence or lesser charge. If no plea bargain is reached, the case goes to trial. In Texas, trials can be either a bench trial where the judge decides the case or a jury trial where a group of citizens listen to the evidence and make a decision. Both the prosecution and defense present their cases, question witnesses, and provide evidence. At the end of the trial, the judge or jury will deliver a verdict, guilty or not guilty. If the defendant is found guilty, the case moves on to sentencing. After a guilty verdict, the judge will hold a sentencing hearing. The judge considers factors like the severity of the crime, the defendant's criminal history, and any victim impact statements before determining the sentence. Sentences in Texas can range from probation and community service to imprisonment, and in severe cases, even the death penalty. If found not guilty, the defendant is released and the case is closed. Even after sentencing, the process isn't necessarily over. Defendants have the right to appeal their conviction or sentence. This means their case could go before a higher court for review. Appeals can take years, and they often delay the final closure of a case. It's also important to remember that victims have rights throughout this process. Texas has specific laws to protect victims and ensure they're informed about court dates, plea bargains, and the status of the case. For victims of crime, navigating the Texas criminal justice process can be emotionally and mentally exhausting. Victim advocates can provide support, explain legal options, and guide victims through each step. The criminal justice process in Texas can seem complex, but understanding each step helps victims, families, and communities know what to expect. If you or someone you know has been affected by a crime, don't hesitate to reach out for support. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to Victim Advocacy Central for more insights into the criminal justice process and tips for victims of crime. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, drop them in the comments below. Stay informed, stay empowered, and take care.